Tom Lang.
นี่ถ้าเป็นคนอื่นผมหันไปด่าแล้วนะ
Okay guys, we're back. So the intro you saw just now, that was about a while back, 3 weeks ago actually. And I've been driving the car as a daily, pretty much. Almost every day I drive this to work. On the weekends I drive this car to do more car stuff. And I feel like I'm ready to talk about it. So in the intro you saw I did 2 things to the car. Number 1, I changed the intake to a Mugen intake system. You know, it looks pretty cool with the red box, the K and N air filter. To be honest, it's probably not money well spent. Anything with the Mugen name on it is kind of ridiculously priced because you're buying it almost for the brand. And I mean, it adds bling to the engine bay, but to be honest, I do prefer the stock look. The reason I bought it is because I hoped it would improve the intake noise of the car. I wanted to get more of a intake noise. I think if I had gone and got the Grop M intake kit, that would have sounded a lot better because that's a carbon airbox and it's sucking air directly from the bulkhead. I've seen some videos and you can hear the difference in the videos that people posted on YouTube. With the Mugen Airbox, it didn't really make a difference to the noise, to be honest. I could barely tell the difference. Maybe it's a tiny bit louder, but there is no tonal change. The tone is the same. The type of sound that it makes is pretty much the same. It doesn't feel different. Within 5 minutes of driving, I have forgotten that I have a new cold air intake kit in this car, which is kind of a shame because I spent big money on it. So let's look on the bright side then. Maybe the noise doesn't sound any better, but perhaps I get the added benefit of extra power, extra horsepowers. And according to the dyno results, after bolting on the intake kit, it produced about 2 to 3 more horsepower. You're not gonna feel it. And so if you're someone who is considering to get one of these, I would say, unless you really want the Mugen Airbox in your engine bay, you're better off just not getting it, because you can't really hear the difference and you can't really feel the difference. So why else are you getting it other than having the visual delight of looking at it when you open the hood? So it's not worth it. In my opinion, it's not worth it. Okay, but I did do another thing that day, and I wasn't planning to, but my friends who worked at the dyno, they convinced me to remap the car. And to be honest, this is really money well spent. Normally, I am not so excited about remapping any naturally aspirated engine cars because from my experience, I don't really feel that much difference before and after the remap. For example, the M3, the E90 M3 that I have, I remapped it and I couldn't really feel a big difference. It didn't feel like it was transforming the car. It didn't feel like an upgrade. And when I removed the map, because I wanted to feel the difference, I also couldn't feel much of a difference. Even though on the dyno there was a significant gain. I think I gained about 20 horsepower or something, 20 or 30 horsepower. That's pretty significant. But I could not feel it when I'm driving. And so I have always been kind of hesitant to remap any NA cars. But I have to say, this on the K20, it really surprised me. So the software he used, it's like he was changing the source code. So the screen was like some matrix shit, you know. It was all a bunch of green and black coding screens, and it's full of numbers and text. I had no idea what the guy was doing. He told me he has to remember what each string of code represented, and he has to modify the code in those strings. I had absolutely no idea. That guy is just a very good tuner. And what he basically did was a few things. He didn't mess with the ignition timing, because these cars out of the factory in Japan, they were meant to run on 100 octane fuel. In Thailand, we get gasohol 95, which is basically 5% ethanol, and the octane rating for that is 95. So it's lower than what the car is meant to do. However, this car is fitted with a knock sensor, so the knock sensor would retard the timing whenever it detects knock. And so we don't really need to mess with the ignition timing, because the ECU is already running the most efficient ignition timing that the engine can run. But what we did do is we altered the fueling, so we get a better air-fuel ratio to maximize the power. And the other thing that he did, which truly made a difference, is he changed the throttle mapping. As you know, this engine is fly-by-wire, and so the throttle pedal itself is not physically connected by a cable to the throttle body, which means you can program how linear the throttle body opens in correspondence to the throttle pedal. And from the factory, it's actually quite interesting to see that if you are at the low RPM range, the graph is kind of like this. So it starts off pretty much flat, and then it goes up steeper towards the end of the pedal travel, which I actually felt when I was driving the car before, because I always felt like sorry, I just had to do that. I always felt like the gas pedal, when you're off cam, it just feels a bit lethargic. But what my friend did was he made it linear, and that made a huge difference in terms of driving. Now when you're off cam, by off cam I mean before VTEC kicks in, it's peppy. It's so damn peppy. It almost feels like the 205. It's not as peppy as the 205, because the 205, the cams were designed to be mid-range torque, but it just feels the car is so much more alive. And before, I feel like I had to make excuses for it when it's off cam. I had to tell myself, oh, it's the characteristic of the car, but now I don't have to. I can enjoy it off cam. It's a very fun car off cam. Really peppy. It truly transformed the car. I did not expect that. Like that's probably one of the most pleasant surprises after the remap. The other thing which he did is, I'm not sure if it doesn't seem like a popular thing, but he moved the VTEC to kick in at around 4,600, 4,700 RPM. Previously, VTEC would kick in at nearly 6,000, I think 5.8. And that's fun because, you know, it's like having a turbo kick in, but it doesn't really make sense. If you look at the dyno, it goes up suddenly like that, and the second cam profile, a huge part of the second cam profile is just being cut off. It's not being used. And so what my friend did was he made the switch over much earlier, so the area under the curve overall is much larger than before. And it transformed the car. It really transformed the car. Now you can have fun. You can have so much fun. The engine feels so much more lively between 5 to 6. Whereas before, 5 to 6, you really had no torque. See, the VTEC light is on and I'm at 5 to 6. And you can enjoy VTEC from 5 to 6. It's so torquey and it sounds like a rally car. It's buzzing. You couldn't do that before. You had to be in a much lower gear. Now technically, I can move the VTEC even lower to maximize the area under the curve even more, but I didn't really want it to do that because I don't want the VTEC to kick in too early. I feel like 4-6 is a good place to do the switch. It's a good compromise, especially now because if I'm in 6th gear, VTEC will not kick in until when I'm close to around 150 kilometers per hour. And so if I'm cruising on the highway, it won't engage VTEC. So right now it's not being engaged. So it's perfect. If I go faster, 153 is when VTEC gets engaged. So for me, that's around the right speed that I want it to be. Of course, I can downshift. If I downshift, then it'll be in VTEC. But I don't need to use super high revs now. I can use the 5 to 6, which I think 5 to 6 is so much fun. I can't believe from the factory they didn't turn on VTEC earlier. And that's one of the questions that I want to ask some of the viewers, for people who know these cars. Why didn't Honda make VTEC kick in earlier? Is it because of emissions? Or is it because of noise? Or is it because they wanted the switch over to be more dramatic? Because the later you turn on VTEC, the bigger the kick you feel. Right now, when VTEC turns on, you don't really feel the kick as much as before. But you do get the change in the sound because of the higher lift. See, the sound changes. So you know VTEC is on even without seeing the light, but you don't get the kick as much as before. But I like that because if you're doing performance driving, you want the power to come on as linearly as possible. That's part of the reason why I prefer naturally aspirated cars, because in a turbo car, you get the turbo kick, and that sometimes can make cornering a bit difficult because your power output is not linear, and that could mess up the balance of the car mid-corner. And so I think having VTEC kick on at mid-4000s is kind of the sweet spot for me. Perfect. 5th gear, it's around 125 when it kicks. And because you have a wider VTEC range, you don't have to shift at such a high RPM range to keep in the VTEC range as before. And it just makes the car overall feel a bit more flexible to use, a bit less high-strung and more usable, which I think for a road car is very nice. So just to conclude everything, what do I think about the remap? Well, I think it's totally worth it. Anyone who is considering a remap on the K20, just do it. And remember, the three things is to number one, you optimize the air-fuel ratio, and number two, you make the throttle mapping more linear. Number three, you should turn on VTEC at around 4005, 4006. It will totally change the characteristic of the car and improve the usability of the engine. And for the intake, don't get the Mugen unless you really like the branding and what it stands for. If you must get a cold air intake kit, I would recommend getting the Grab M, the carbon one. That sounds properly nice. Oh, I love this car. You might be able to tell from this video, I think my engine mount is going bad, so I'm gonna have to change that. And if I do change that, I'll probably change the transmission mount as well. VTEC all the way. So now I get VTEC for half of the RPM range. What's not to like? It stays in VTEC, even if I shift at 7,000. Now that the car is a bit faster than before, the weakest link are the brakes. The other day I was on the highway going 225 and there was a car in front of me and I had to slow down really quickly to around 120 and the brakes faded. The car wouldn't stop and it was really scary. And that's when I knew I need to upgrade the brakes on this car. So what I will do next is I will change the engine and transmission mounts. I'm looking for the kit, and then I will upgrade the brakes. And after that, it'll be ready for the track day. Yep, so thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, just let me know. Peace. Bye.